The Velthari had ruled the Orion Spur for 12,000 years. In all that time, no one had ever defeated them in battle. No one had even come close. They were beings of living crystal. Their bodies caught light and scattered it into rainbows. Their ships were grown from the same crystalline substance, beautiful and deadly. They moved through space like shards of broken glass, sharp and glittering and impossible to stop. Their weapon was simple but perfect. Every Velthari ship could emit a resonance field. This field vibrated at frequencies that tore apart the molecular bonds in enemy technology. It was like singing a note that shattered glass, except it shattered everything. Engines fell apart. Hulls cracked. Life support systems collapsed into useless components. 43 species had tried to fight the Velthari. 43 species had watched their fleets dissolve into floating debris. Now those species served the Dominion as slaves or existed as cautionary tales told to children. The Velthari had forgotten what it felt like to be afraid. Archon Crystallis stood on the command deck of his flagship, the Eternal Resonance. He was tall even for his kind, nearly 3 meters of faceted crystal that shifted between deep purple and black depending on the light. He had commanded the expansion fleet for 600 years. In that time, he had personally overseen the conquest of 11 species. Today would make 12. The human colony world hung before him like a blue and green jewel. His sensors told him it held approximately 2 million inhabitants. They called it New Geneva, a pleasant name for a pleasant world. The Velthari had many uses for pleasant worlds and the soft creatures who lived on them. "Send the standard message," Crystallis commanded. His voice rang like struck crystal, harmonics layering over each other. His communications officer complied. The message was the same one the Dominion had sent to countless worlds before. Surrender all inhabitants for processing. Resistance would result in immediate and total annihilation. They had 3 standard days to comply. Crystallis did not expect them to surrender. Humans were new to this region of space. They had not yet learned what every other species knew. They would probably send ships to defend their colony. Those ships would dissolve under the resonance field like all the others before them. Then the survivors on the planet would understand, and they would be much more cooperative. It was almost boring, really. But duty was duty. On the surface of New Geneva, Governor Thomas Chen read the ultimatum 3 times. Each time, the words remained the same. Each time, his hands shook a little more. He was 57 years old. He had been a teacher before he became a politician, and he had been a politician before he became a governor. Nothing in his life had prepared him for this moment. Nothing could prepare anyone for this moment. 2 million people, families, children, old people who had come here to retire in peace, young people who had come here to build something new, all of them looking to him for answers he did not have. "How long for a full evacuation?" he asked his emergency coordinator. The woman's face was pale. "With every ship we have, including private vessels, maybe 300,000 people in 3 days. If we're lucky. 300,000 out of 2 million. And that was if they were lucky." Chen closed his eyes. "Send a distress call. Maximum range. Maybe someone is close enough to help." He did not believe anyone would be close enough. He did not believe anyone would come even if they were. The Velthari had 300 warships in orbit. Who would be foolish enough to challenge those odds? Admiral Miriam Okonkwo was eating dinner when the distress call arrived. She was in her private quarters on the Endurance, the flagship of the Terran Defense Fleet's 7th Expeditionary Group. The meal was simple: rice and vegetables and a small piece of fish. She had learned long ago that command required energy, and energy required food, even when her stomach wanted to reject everything she put in it. Her communications officer's voice came through the intercom. "Admiral, we're receiving a priority distress signal from the New Geneva colony. Velthari fleet in orbit. 300+ warships. They're demanding surrender of all colonists." Okonkwo set down her chopsticks. "How far are we from New Geneva?" 14 hours at maximum hyperspace. "And how far is the nearest fleet group that could actually challenge 300 Velthari ships?" A pause. "Task Force 7 is approximately 6 days out, Admiral. They're the closest significant force. 6 days. The colonists had 3 days. The math was simple and brutal. "What assets do we have?" Okonkwo asked. "Ma'am, we have 12 ships. The Endurance, 4 cruisers, and 7 destroyers. Combined crew complement of approximately 8,000 personnel, 12 ships against 300. Okonkwo had read the reports on Velthari engagements. She knew what their resonance field did to enemy fleets. Every tactical simulation, every strategic analysis, every military expert agreed on one point. You could not fight the Velthari with conventional forces. You needed overwhelming numbers, or you needed to run. She had neither overwhelming numbers nor any intention of running. Set course for New Geneva, she said. Maximum speed. Admiral? The communications officer's voice carried a question he was too professional to ask directly. Those are 2 million human beings, Lieutenant. We're not leaving them to die alone. The 7th Expeditionary Group jumped to hyperspace 12 minutes later. Governor Chen was reviewing evacuation plans when his assistant interrupted him. Sir, we've received a response to our distress call. From whom? The Terran Defense Fleet, sir. The 7th Expeditionary Group. They say they're 14 hours out and they're coming to help. For a moment, Chen felt hope surge through him. Then he asked the obvious question. How many ships do they have? 12, sir. The hope died as quickly as it had been born. 12 ships, against 300. It was not help. It was suicide. Tell them not to come, Chen said. Tell them there's nothing they can do. I won't have more people die for nothing. His assistant shifted uncomfortably. Sir, I already sent that message. The Admiral replied. What did she say? She said, and I quote, We're aware of the odds. We're coming anyway. Prepare your people for evacuation. We'll buy you what time we can. Chen stared at the message for a long moment. Then he turned back to his evacuation plans with new determination. If those 12 ships were willing to die for his people, the least he could do was make sure their deaths meant something. On the Eternal Resonance, Archon Crystallis received reports of the incoming human fleet with something approaching amusement. 12 ships, his tactical officer reported. Standard human military configuration. They will arrive in approximately 13 hours. Let them come, Crystallis said. It will provide entertainment while we wait for the deadline. Should we intercept them before they reach the colony? Crystallis considered this. A sensible tactical suggestion. But there was something to be said for allowing an enemy to come to you. It demonstrated confidence. It sent a message to any other species watching. The Velthari did not need to chase their prey. Prey came to them. No, he decided. Let them arrive. Let them see our full fleet. Let them understand what they face. Perhaps they will be wise enough to flee. If not, we will destroy them in full view of the colony. It will encourage cooperation. His officers signaled agreement. None of them felt any concern. Why would they? No fleet had ever survived contact with the Velthari. 12 ships would provide a few moments of sport, nothing more. Admiral Okonkwo spent the 14-hour journey preparing her people for what was coming. She called a fleet-wide briefing and told them the truth. They were going to fight a force that outnumbered them 25-1. They were going to face a weapon that had destroyed every fleet ever sent against it. Many of them would not survive. I won't order anyone to follow me into this, she said. If any ship wants to break off, you can do so with my blessing. There's no shame in recognizing impossible odds. Not a single ship broke off. Okonkwo had expected nothing less. These were her people. She had trained them, served with them, bled with them. They were not the kind of people who abandoned civilians to die. Then let me tell you why we have a chance, she continued. The Velthari resonance field works by disrupting complex molecular structures. The more sophisticated your technology, the more vulnerable you are to it. That's why every species that's faced them has lost. They all built ships full of elegant, advanced, intricate systems. She paused. We didn't. Human ships are built stupid. We use layered composites instead of advanced alloys. We use redundant mechanical systems instead of integrated smart networks. Our ships are ugly, clunky, and about as sophisticated as a brick. And just like a brick, there's not much elegance for the resonance field to disrupt. She could see understanding dawning on her officers' faces. We're going to take damage, she warned them. The field will still hurt us, but it won't kill us as fast as they expect. And every second we stay alive is a second we can fight back. Every second we fight back is a second those colonists have to evacuate. The briefing ended. Across 12 ships, 8,000 men and women began preparing for battle. They checked weapons. They reinforced damage control stations. They wrote messages to families they might never see again. And in the quiet moments, they found themselves doing something strange. They found themselves hoping. Not for victory. That was too much to ask. But hoping that somehow, against all odds, they might make a difference. The 7th Expeditionary Group dropped out of hyperspace at 0847 hours, ship time. Before them hung the blue and green jewel of New Geneva. Around it, like a cloud of glittering shards, hung 300 Velthari warships. Admiral Okonkwo looked at the tactical display. The numbers had not changed. The odds had not improved. But she was here now, and there was no turning back. All ships, she said calmly. Battle stations. Today we find out what humans are made of. Across the void, 300 crystalline warships turned their attention toward the 12 newcomers. And Archon Crystallis, watching from his command deck, smiled a crystal smile. The entertainment was about to begin. The 12 human ships hung in space like small fish facing a swarm of sharks. The comparison was not lost on anyone watching. Across the colony of New Geneva, 2 million people looked up at the sky and wondered if they were witnessing courage or madness. Perhaps both. Admiral Miriam Okonkwo stood on the bridge of the Endurance and studied the enemy formation. The Velthari had arranged themselves in a perfect crescent around the planet. It was a blockade formation, designed to prevent escape rather than to fight. They had not even bothered to form battle lines. They did not think they needed to. Admiral, her sensor officer reported, the Velthari are broadcasting on all frequencies. Put it through. The voice that filled the bridge was like wind chimes in a storm. Musical, cold, and utterly confident. Human vessels, you have entered Velthari sovereign space. You are outnumbered and outmatched. Withdraw immediately or you will be destroyed. Okonkwo did not respond. Instead, she turned to her navigation officer. Take us in. Formation, Epsilon. All ships maintain spacing. The 12 ships began to move forward. On the Eternal Resonance, Archon Crystallis watched with mild interest. He had expected the humans to flee. That would have been the sensible response. Instead, they were advancing, directly into the teeth of his fleet. Activate resonance field, he commanded. Standard suppression pattern. His weapons officer complied. Across the Velthari fleet, 300 ships began to hum with power. The resonance field spread outward like an invisible wave, washing over the incoming human vessels. Crystallis waited for the familiar sight. Ships coming apart at the seams, hull plates separating, engines dying, crew compartments venting atmosphere. He had seen it dozens of times before. It was almost beautiful in its way. The human ships shuddered. Then they kept coming. Increase power, Crystallis ordered, his voice carrying a slight edge for the first time. The field intensified. The human ships shook visibly. One of them, a destroyer at the edge of the formation, began trailing sparks and debris. But it did not dissolve. It did not fall apart. It kept moving forward, wounded but functional. Impossible, Crystallis's tactical officer said. No species has ever resisted the resonance field. Crystallis said nothing. He was too busy watching his perfect weapon fail for the first time in 12,000 years. On the Endurance, Admiral Okonkwo gripped her command chair as the ship groaned around her. The sound was terrible. Metal stressed beyond its limits. Systems failing and being replaced by backups. Crew members reporting damage from every deck. But the ship was holding. Damage report, she demanded. We've lost secondary sensor arrays. Her damage control officer replied. Hull stress at 70% tolerance. 3 compartments sealed due to microfractures. But main systems are still operational. Okonkwo allowed herself a small smile. The Velthari had built their weapon to fight civilizations that built sophisticated ships, complex alloys, integrated systems, elegant engineering. Humans built ships the way they had once built tanks. Heavy, redundant, ugly, simple. The resonance field was tearing at the Endurance. But there was nothing elegant to unravel. The ship was too stupid to know it was supposed to fall apart. All ships, report status, Okonkwo commanded. One by one, her captains responded. Every ship was damaged. Every ship was hurting. But every ship was still fighting. Well then, Okonkwo said quietly, let's show them what we can do. The first human missiles launched at 0912 hours. They were not sophisticated weapons. simple chemical propulsion, basic explosive warheads, the kind of weapons that more advanced civilizations had abandoned centuries ago. The Velthari point defense systems, designed to intercept energy weapons and guided munitions, struggled to track them. 3 missiles struck a Velthari destroyer. The crystalline ship shattered like a dropped vase. For a moment, there was silence across both fleets. Then the Velthari opened fire with everything they had. The space between the two forces filled with light. Energy beams crossed the void. Kinetic rounds screamed through vacuum. The human ships weaved and dodged as best they could, but there was no escaping the wall of fire coming toward them. The destroyer Vigilant took a direct hit to its engine section. The ship spun wildly, flames jetting from its stern. But even as it tumbled, it continued firing. Its crew refused to abandon their posts. The cruiser Defiant lost its forward weapons array. The captain immediately rotated the ship to bring her rear batteries to bear. The Endurance absorbed 3 impacts that should have crippled her. Admiral Okonkwo was thrown from her chair by the 3rd hit. She pulled herself back up, blood running from a cut above her eye, and continued directing the battle. Archon Crystallis watched in disbelief as the engagement continued. 10 minutes, 20 minutes, 30 minutes. The human ships were being pounded. They were clearly suffering, but they would not die. He had seen fleets larger than this dissolve in seconds under the resonance field. He had watched sophisticated warships from proud civilizations crumble like sandcastles. Yet these primitive humans, with their crude ships and simple weapons, continued to fight. "What are they made of?" he muttered. His tactical officer did not have an answer. The battle raged for 3 hours. In that time, the humans lost their first ship. The destroyer Vigilant, already crippled from earlier damage, finally succumbed to accumulated stress. Her reactor failed. Her hull gave way. 247 crew members died in the explosion. But before she died, the Vigilant took 6 Velthari ships with her. The remaining 11 human ships fought on. They took damage that would have destroyed any other fleet. They absorbed punishment that should have been impossible to survive. And they kept firing. The Velthari lost ship after ship, not because human weapons were superior. They were not. But the Velthari had never learned to fight a real battle. For 12,000 years, their resonance field had done the work for them. Their tactics were built around enemies who dissolved. Their training assumed opponents who could not fight back. The humans could fight back, and they knew how to take a punch. Governor Chen watched the battle from his emergency bunker on New Geneva's surface. The tactical display showed him everything. The overwhelming Velthari numbers, the desperate human defense, the ships dying on both sides. How are they still fighting? His emergency coordinator asked. Chen shook his head. I don't know. But we need to make their sacrifice count. How many people have we evacuated? 400,000 so far. We've got every ship we have running continuous trips to the outer system. 400,000. Better than they had hoped. Still not enough. Keep them moving, Chen ordered. Every life we save is a victory. On the eternal resonance, Archon Crystallis made a decision. The resonance field was not working. Conventional weapons were taking too long. It was time for a strategy his people had not used in 8,000 years. Order the fleet to close range, he commanded. Direct ramming attacks on the human vessels. His officers stared at him in shock. Ramming was a tactic of desperation. A tactic for species who had nothing else. The Velthari had not needed it in millennia. Do it, Crystallis ordered. These humans refuse to die at range. Let us see how they handle our ships in their laps. The Velthari fleet surged forward. Admiral Okonkwo saw them coming. She understood immediately what it meant. The enemy commander had decided to stop playing games. This was about to become much more personal. All ships, she announced. Close quarters engagement incoming. Prepare for impact. The first Velthari ship to attempt a ram was a destroyer. It accelerated directly at the cruiser Defiant, its crystalline prow gleaming like a spear. The Defiant's captain, a woman named Sarah Morrison, did not try to dodge. There was no time. Instead, she ordered all forward batteries to concentrate on the incoming ship. At the last possible moment, just before impact, the Velthari destroyer shattered under concentrated fire. The debris still hit the Defiant. The cruiser lurched sideways. Her hull breached in a dozen places, but she survived. Other Velthari ships were not so lucky with their targets. The destroyer, Relentless, was struck amidships by a Velthari cruiser. Both ships died together, human and crystal twisted into a single mass of wreckage. The destroyer Stalwart managed to evade one ramming attack only to be caught by a second. Her captain's last act was to overload his reactor, taking the attacking ship with him. The battle had become a brawl. Ships at point-blank range, no formation, no strategy, just desperate violence. The Endurance found herself surrounded by 4 Velthari ships. Admiral Okonkwo ordered her helmsman to take them straight through the formation. The old ship groaned as she accelerated, her damaged engines pushing her forward. One Velthari ship clipped the Endurance's port side. Hull plates sheared away. An entire deck vented to space. But the Endurance kept moving, her guns blazing, her crew fighting to the last. They emerged from the formation covered in damage but still alive. Behind them, 2 of the 4 Velthari ships were dead. After 4 hours of combat, the human fleet had lost 4 ships. The Velthari had lost 47. The remaining 8 human vessels were all wounded. The Endurance was missing an engine pod. The Defiant had no forward weapons. The cruiser Resolute was venting atmosphere from multiple decks, but they were still there, still fighting. Archon Crystallis stared at the tactical display. The numbers did not make sense. He had lost 47 ships. 47. Against 12 crewed human vessels. His people had not lost 47 ships in a single engagement in 5,000 years. Archon, his second-in-command, said carefully, "Perhaps we should reconsider our approach." Crystallis turned to face her. Sub-Archon Prismus was a veteran of many campaigns. She had served under him for 3 centuries. Never before had she questioned his judgment. "You suggest retreat?" he asked. "I suggest patience," she replied. "We still have 250 ships. The humans have 8. We can wait them out. Surround them. Wear them down. There is no need for further losses." It was sensible advice. Crystallis knew it was sensible advice. But sense had nothing to do with what was happening in his heart. Rage was happening. Humiliation was happening. 12,000 years of dominance, challenged by a handful of primitive ships from a species barely old enough to travel between stars. "No," he said. "We end this now. All ships, concentrate fire on the human flagship. Destroy Admiral Okonkwo and the rest will fall." The Velthari fleet turned its attention to the Endurance. Okonkwo saw the enemy reforming. She understood what was coming. Every remaining Velthari ship was targeting her. "Admiral," her communications officer said, "the other ships are asking for orders. They want to cover our retreat." Okonkwo shook her head. "No retreat. If we run, they'll ignore us and glass the colony. We stay. Ma'am, they'll focus everything on us. We won't survive." "Probably not," Okonkwo agreed. "But that's not the point." She opened a channel to the entire fleet. "All ships, this is Admiral Okonkwo. The enemy is concentrating on the Endurance. That means they're not bombarding the colony. Every minute they spend trying to kill us is another minute for evacuation. So we're going to give them a fight they'll never forget." She paused. "It has been an honor serving with you all." The responses came back immediately. No one suggested surrender. No one suggested escape. 8 damaged ships formed a protective ring around their wounded flagship. The Velthari fleet began its final approach, and in the colony below, evacuation ships continued to launch. Every minute counted. Every life saved was a victory. Governor Chen watched the human fleet prepare to make its last stand. He wiped tears from his eyes and gave orders to keep the evacuation moving. Whatever happened next, he would make sure the galaxy remembered what these humans had done. The Velthari fleet closed in like a tightening fist. 250 crystalline warships, each one beautiful and deadly, converging on 8 wounded human vessels. Admiral Miriam Okonkwo stood on a bridge that was falling apart around her. Smoke drifted from damaged consoles. Emergency lights cast everything in an angry red glow. Half her crew stations were empty, their occupants either dead or reassigned to damage control. She had been awake for 18 hours. Her uniform was torn. Blood from the cut above her eye had dried on her face. She had not eaten since the battle began. None of that mattered. "Status report," she demanded. Her damage control officer pulled up what remained of his displays. "We've lost engine pod 3 completely. Engine pods 1 and 2 are running at 60%. Hull integrity is at 42%. We've sealed off decks 7 through 12. Weapons are at 35% capacity. The Endurance was dying. She was just too stubborn to admit it. What about the fleet? All ships reporting significant damage. The Defiant has lost main power. She's running on backups. The Resolute has no functional weapons on her port side. The destroyers are holding together, but they've all taken multiple hits. 8 ships. All of them hurt. All of them still fighting. Okonkwo felt a fierce pride in her people. They had done the impossible. They had stood against the Velthari and survived. Not for long, perhaps, but longer than anyone had ever done before. The enemy fleet? She asked, closing at standard attack speed. They'll be in optimal firing range in 6 minutes. 6 minutes. In 6 minutes, 250 ships would open fire on 8. The math was not complicated. This was the end. Unless she could find a way to change the equation. Okonkwo studied the tactical display. The Velthari were coming in a standard formation, their flagship at the center, surrounded by layers of escorts and support ships. It was a textbook approach. Safe, predictable, and that was the key. The Velthari had been invincible for 12,000 years. They had never needed to adapt, never needed to innovate. They had one strategy because one strategy had always been enough. Humans had been fighting wars since before they could write. They had learned long ago that victory often belonged not to the strongest, but to the most creative. "Get me Captain Morrison on the Defiant," Okonkwo ordered, and Captain Zhang on the Resolute. Priority channel. The 2 faces appeared on her display. Morrison was bleeding from a wound on her shoulder. Zhang had burns across half his face. Both of them looked ready to fight until their last breath. "I have an idea," Okonkwo said. "It's risky. It might not work. And even if it does, most of us probably won't survive." Morrison smiled grimly. "So no change from our current situation. Listen carefully. Here's what we're going to do." Archon Crystallis watched the human fleet with cold satisfaction. The prey had stopped running. They were forming up around their flagship, clearly preparing for a final stand. Admirable, in a primitive way, but ultimately pointless. "Order the fleet to maintain formation," he commanded. "We will overwhelm them with concentrated fire. I want the flagship destroyed first. The others will lose their will to fight without their leader." His tactical officer acknowledged the order. Around the Eternal Resonance, Velthari ships arranged themselves into perfect attack lines. Crystal hulls gleamed under the light of New Geneva's sun. It would be beautiful. It would be terrible. It would be the end of this embarrassing interruption to their conquest. "Archon," Sub-Archon Prismus said quietly. "The humans are moving." Crystallis looked at the display. The 8 human ships had broken formation. They were spreading out, accelerating on divergent courses. "They're trying to scatter," his tactical officer said dismissively. "A desperate gambit. We can pursue them individually." "No," Prismus said, her voice sharp. "Look at their trajectories. They're not fleeing. They're maneuvering." Crystallis examined the display more closely. She was right. The human ships were not trying to escape. They were repositioning themselves around the Velthari fleet, creating a loose sphere. "What are they doing?" he asked. Before anyone could answer, the humans attacked. Not the main body of the Velthari fleet. Not the obvious targets. They struck at the edges. At the escort ships. At the supply vessels. At the weak points in the formation that no one had ever bothered to protect because no one had ever survived long enough to threaten them. The destroyer Hawk dove into a gap in the Velthari lines. Guns blazing. She took out 3 escort ships before the enemy could respond. Then she was gone, racing toward another weak point before retaliation could find her. The cruiser Resolute launched everything she had at a cluster of supply ships. Secondary explosions rippled through the Velthari formation as fuel and ammunition cooked off. The Defiant, barely able to move under her own power, positioned herself to block a counterattack. She absorbed fire meant for the more mobile ships, acting as a shield while her sisters struck. Crystallis watched in disbelief as his perfect formation fell into chaos. "They're using hit-and-run tactics," Prismus observed. "They know they can't defeat us in direct combat, so they're bleeding us instead. They have 8 ships. We have 250, and our ships are designed to fight enemies who dissolve under the resonance field. Not enemies who strike and fade. Not enemies who know how to exploit our formations. Crystalis felt something he had not experienced in centuries. Uncertainty. Admiral Okonkwo coordinated the attack from the wounded bridge of the Endurance. She couldn't match the Velthari in firepower. She couldn't match them in numbers, but she could outthink them. The Velthari had never faced guerrilla tactics. Their enemies had always come at them head-on, trusting in superior technology that failed against the resonance field. No one had ever survived long enough to try anything clever. Humans had invented clever. Hawk, break left. There's a gap in their response formation. Hit their censorships. Resolute, fall back and regroup. You've done enough for now. Defiant, hold position. You're drawing fire from 6 different ships. Keep them focused on you. Her fleet was wounded and outnumbered, but they were fast, they were unpredictable, and they were very, very good at causing damage. The battle had been going on for 6 hours now. The Velthari had lost another 32 ships. The humans had lost 2 more, leaving them with only 6. But the ratio was impossible by any standard of galactic warfare. On New Geneva's surface, Governor Chen watched the evacuation continue. They had now saved over 700,000 people. Ships were running continuous trips to the outer system, where a convoy was forming to take refugees to safety. Every minute the human fleet survived was more lives saved. "Sir," his assistant reported, "we're getting reports from other systems. The battle is being broadcast across the sector. Everyone is watching." Chen nodded slowly. Of course they were watching. This was unprecedented. This was history. What are they saying? They're asking who these humans are, how they're doing this, why they're fighting so hard for a colony they barely know. Chen thought about Admiral Okonkwo. He had never met her. He probably never would. But he understood something about her now. About all of them. "Tell them the truth," he said. "Tell them that humans don't abandon their own." Archon Crystalis was facing something his people had not experienced in 12,000 years. A real battle. The humans were everywhere and nowhere. They struck from unexpected angles. They exploited gaps in his formation before he could close them. They refused to stand still and die like civilized enemies. "Enough," he finally declared. "Order all ships to ignore the small vessels. Concentrate everything on the flagship. When their admiral dies, this farce ends." The Velthari fleet reformed. 218 ships oriented on the Endurance. It was overkill beyond any reasonable measure. But Crystalis was done being reasonable. All ships fire. The universe lit up. Admiral Okonkwo saw the attack coming. 218 ships, all firing at once, all targeting her. The Endurance could not dodge that much firepower. Nothing could dodge that much firepower. "All hands," she announced calmly. "Brace for impact." The first wave hit. The Endurance screamed. Hull plates tore away. Engine pod 2 exploded. An entire section of the ship simply ceased to exist. Okonkwo was thrown across the bridge. She hit a console hard enough to crack ribs. Alarms howled around her. Emergency systems activated, then failed, then activated again. The second wave hit. The ship lurched violently. Okonkwo heard her crew screaming as consoles exploded. The main display shattered, showering the bridge with debris. But the Endurance did not die. The ship had been built to survive. Layer upon layer of redundant systems. Compartmentalized design that isolated damage. A hull that broke apart in sections rather than all at once. She was crippled. She was burning. She had lost most of her crew and nearly all her weapons. But her reactor still functioned. Her bridge was still intact. Admiral Okonkwo was still alive. "Damage report." She croaked through broken ribs. Her damage control officer was dead. So was her tactical officer. Her helmsman was unconscious. Only 3 people on the bridge were still capable of functioning. A young ensign, her face covered in blood, pulled herself to a working console. "Admiral, we've lost everything except basic life support and minimal propulsion. The ship is done. We can't fight anymore." Okonkwo pulled herself upright. Pain lanced through her chest. Something was broken inside her. Probably several somethings. "Then we become a target," she said. "Every shot they fire at us is a shot they're not firing at the colony. Keep the ship moving. Make them chase us." "Admiral, the ship can barely maintain course." "Then maintain course." Okonkwo's voice was iron. We're not done yet. Archon Crystallis stared at his display in disbelief. The human flagship was still moving. Crippled, burning, barely functional, and it was still moving. What does it take to kill these creatures? He demanded. No one answered. No one had an answer. The other human ships had used the distraction to regroup. They were forming up again, positioning themselves around their wounded flagship. 5 ships, all damaged, all hurting, refusing to abandon their leader. Crystallis looked at the tactical situation. He had lost 79 ships. 79 against 12 human vessels. The math was impossible. The reality was undeniable. His fleet could still win. They still outnumbered the humans more than 30-1. But at what cost? How many more ships would they lose? How long would this battle last? And what would happen to the Dominion's reputation when word spread that a handful of primitive humans had fought them to a standstill? Archon, Prismus said quietly. The humans are broadcasting. What? They're sending a message. Not to us. To the colony. To everyone watching. Crystallis gestured for the message to be played. Admiral Okonkwo's voice filled the bridge. Weak but clear. Determined. This is Admiral Miriam Okonkwo of the Terran Defense Fleet. To the people of New Geneva, continue your evacuation. We will hold as long as we can. To anyone else receiving this message, remember what you've seen today. The Velthari are not invincible. They can be fought. They can be hurt. They can be defeated. All it takes is the will to stand up. All it takes is the refusal to surrender. This is what humans do. We endure. The message ended. Crystallis looked at his fleet. Then he looked at the 5 crippled human ships, gathered around their dying flagship, and for the first time in his 600-year career, he felt something that might have been respect. It did not change what he had to do, but he would remember it. Resume the attack, he ordered. Finish them. The Velthari fleet moved forward, but across the sector, billions of beings had heard Okonkwo's message. They had seen what humans could do, and they would never forget. The Velthari fleet advanced like a wall of glittering death. 218 ships, their crystalline hulls catching the light of distant stars, closing on 5 wounded human vessels and 1 dying flagship. Admiral Miriam Okonkwo watched them come through a cracked display screen. The Endurance was barely alive. Most of her crew was dead. Her weapons were gone. Her engines could manage only enough thrust to keep her moving in a straight line. But she was still the flagship. She was still the target. And as long as the Velthari focused on her, they were not bombarding the colony below. Admiral, the young ensign reported, enemy fleet will be in firing range in 4 minutes. 4 minutes. In 4 minutes, it would be over. The Velthari would destroy the Endurance. Then they would destroy the remaining human ships. Then they would turn their attention to New Geneva and complete their conquest. Unless Okonkwo could find one more trick to play. She studied the enemy formation through pain-blurred eyes. The Velthari were maintaining perfect attack lines. Their flagship, the Eternal Resonance, sat at the center of the formation, protected by layers of escort ships. Archon Crystallis had learned from the earlier chaos. He was keeping his command vessel safe. Safe, protected, stationary. Okonkwo felt a smile cross her battered face. Get me Captain Morrison. And Captain Zhang, and whoever's commanding the remaining destroyers. The faces appeared on her flickering display. Morrison looked worse than before. Zhang was barely conscious. The destroyer captains were all wounded, exhausted, running on nothing but determination. I have one last idea, Okonkwo said. The Velthari flagship hasn't moved since this battle started. Crystallis has been commanding from a fixed position because he's never had to worry about threats reaching him. Admiral, Morrison said slowly. Are you suggesting what I think you're suggesting? We can't win this battle. We were never going to win this battle. But we can take their leader with us. And maybe, just maybe, that will be enough. There was silence on the channel. Then Zhang spoke, his voice rough with pain. What do you need us to do? We have exactly enough firepower between us for one concentrated strike. Every missile, every railgun round, every beam weapon that still functions. We coordinate. We break through their escort screen, and we hit the Eternal Resonance with everything we have left. Their escorts will tear us apart. One of the destroyer captains pointed out. Yes, Okonkwo agreed. They will, but they'll have to choose between stopping us and protecting their flagship. And by the time they make that choice, it will be too late. Another silence. Then Morrison laughed. It was not a happy sound. It was the laugh of someone who had accepted death and found it almost amusing. I always wanted to go out in a blaze of glory, she said. Let's do it. One by one, the other captains agreed. Archon Crystallis watched the human ships begin to move. They were accelerating toward his fleet. Not away, not trying to escape. Directly toward his formation. They're attacking, his tactical officer said with disbelief. 5 crippled ships are attacking 200. They're desperate, Crystallis replied. They know they've lost. This is their final gesture of defiance. But something nagged at him. Something about their formation. They were spreading out, but not randomly. They were positioning themselves in a specific pattern. Archon, Prisma said sharply. Look at their trajectory. Crystallis examined the display more closely. Then he saw it. They were not attacking his fleet. They were attacking him. Every human ship was on a course that would bring them through his escort screen and directly to the eternal resonance. They were not trying to survive. They were trying to take him with them. All ships, intercept, he shouted. Stop them before they reach us. The Velthari fleet scrambled to respond. Escort ships broke formation to engage the incoming humans. Weapons fire lanced across the void. But the humans were not trying to dodge. They were not trying to survive. They were flying straight and true, accepting every hit, taking every wound, focused on one single target. The destroyer Hawk was the first to fall. 3 Velthari ships converged on her, overwhelming her defenses. She exploded in a ball of fire, her crew dying in an instant. But before she died, she launched everything she had. 12 missiles, aimed directly at the eternal resonance. The destroyer Thunder fell next. Then the destroyer Storm. 2 more human ships, wiped from existence. 2 more volleys of fire aimed at the Velthari flagship. The escort ships were intercepting some of the missiles, but not all. The eternal resonance shuddered as the first impacts struck her shields. Return fire, Crystallis screamed. Destroy them all, his ships tried. They poured fire into the remaining human vessels. The cruiser, Resolute, took a dozen hits and began breaking apart. Captain Zhang stayed at his post until the last moment, directing one final barrage before his ship died around him. Only 2 human ships remained, the Defiant and the Endurance. Captain Morrison pushed the Defiant forward with everything her damaged engines could give. The ship was on fire. Her hull was failing. Her crew was dying. But she kept moving. For humanity, Morrison whispered as the Velthari fire converged on her. The Defiant exploded. But in her final seconds, she had closed to point-blank range of the escort screen. Her weapons had carved a path, a narrow corridor of destroyed ships, a path for the Endurance to follow. Admiral Okonkwo saw the corridor open. She saw what Morrison had given her. Helm, she ordered. Take us through. Everything we have left. The Endurance lurched forward. Her single remaining engine pushed her toward the gap in the enemy formation. Velthari ships tried to close the corridor, but they were too slow. The dying human flagship slipped through. Ahead, Crystallis saw his death approaching. The Eternal Resonance was the mightiest ship in the Velthari fleet. Her shields were the strongest. Her armor was the thickest. She had never been damaged in battle, but she was still just a ship. And the Endurance, crippled as she was, still had weapons. Okonkwo looked at her young ensign. Launch everything. Every missile still in the tubes. Every railgun round still in the magazines. Empty the ship. The ensign complied. The Endurance unleashed everything she had left. Missiles streamed from her damaged launchers. Railgun rounds hammered out of weapons that were barely functional. It was not much. Against a fully operational fleet, it would have been nothing. But at point-blank range, against a single target, with no escorts left to intercept, it was enough. The Eternal Resonance's shields flickered. Then they failed. The first missiles struck her hull. Crystal shattered. Armor cracked. Secondary explosions rippled through her structure. Crystallis watched his command deck disintegrate around him. Consoles exploded. His officers died in showers of crystalline fragments. The ship that had carried him for 6 centuries was coming apart. In his final moments, he understood something. The humans had not tried to win. They had not tried to survive. They had simply decided that if they were going to die, they would take him with them. It was not logical. It was not rational. It was something the Velthari had no framework to understand. It was human. The eternal resonance exploded. Archon Crystallis, supreme commander of the Velthari expansion fleet, died in a storm of fire and crystal. The shockwave caught the Endurance and sent her tumbling. Admiral Okonkwo was thrown against a bulkhead. She felt more ribs break, possibly her spine. Pain consumed everything, but through the agony, she heard cheering. Somewhere on her dying ship, the surviving crew members were cheering. They had done it. They had killed the enemy leader. They had proven that the Velthari could be hurt. Okonkwo let herself collapse. The deck was cold against her face. Her vision was fading, but she could still see the display, still see the debris of the eternal resonance spreading across space. Admiral? The young ensign's voice seemed very far away. Admiral, what do we do now? Okonkwo tried to speak. It took 3 attempts before words came out. We survive, she whispered. If we can. Sub-Archon Prismus watched the debris cloud that had been the eternal resonance. Her mentor, her commander, her friend of 3 centuries, was dead, killed by a crippled human ship that should have died hours ago. Around her, the Velthari fleet was in chaos. Command had been decapitated. Officers who had never had to make real decisions were suddenly responsible for hundreds of ships. The resonance field was useless. The enemy flagship was still somehow alive, and the entire galaxy was watching. Prismus understood what happened next would define the Velthari dominion for generations. If they continued the attack, they would probably win. The Endurance was crippled beyond repair. The humans had no more tricks to play. But at what cost? They had already lost 83 ships. More importantly, they had lost the illusion of invincibility. Every species in the sector had seen humans stand against the resonance field. Every species had watched 12 ships hold off 300. Every species had witnessed the death of an Archon. If the Velthari continued, they would prove they could be hurt. They would prove they could be killed, and every conquered species, every subjugated world, would begin to wonder if they could do what the humans had done. Prismus made her decision. All ships, she broadcast. This is Sub-Archon Prismus assuming command. Stand down, hold positions, cease all offensive operations. Confusion rippled through the fleet. Sub-Archon, we have them. We can finish this. And lose how many more ships? 20? 50? 100? Prismus's voice was sharp. The humans have made their point. We have made ours. This battle is over. On the Endurance, the young ensign stared at her displays in disbelief. Admiral, she said softly, the Velthari are holding. They've stopped attacking. Okonkwo did not respond. She could not respond. She was barely conscious, her body shutting down from accumulated damage. But she had heard. They had won. Not victory in the traditional sense. 6 ships destroyed, thousands dead. The Endurance was a hulk that would never fly again, but New Geneva was safe. 2 million people would live. And the Velthari had learned that humans were not prey. Across the colony, across the sector, across the galaxy, beings who had lived in fear of the Velthari for millennia felt something they had almost forgotten. Hope. In his bunker, Governor Chen wept openly, not from grief, from relief, from gratitude, from the overwhelming knowledge that strangers had given everything to save his people. How many did we evacuate? He asked. Over 1 million, sir. And with the Velthari standing down, we can get the rest out safely. 1 million lives saved. Because 12 ships had refused to run. Chen looked up at the sky, toward the debris field where heroes had died and 1 crippled ship still drifted. Get every rescue craft we have up there, he ordered. There are survivors on that ship. I want them found. I want them saved. We owe them everything. The rescue operation began immediately, and in the cold silence of space, the Endurance drifted, broken but unbroken. Her surviving crew waiting for help that was finally coming. Admiral Okonkwo lay on the deck of her shattered bridge, breathing in short, painful gasps, wondering if she would live to see what came next. She had done her duty. Her people had done their duty. The rest was up to history. The first rescue shuttle reached the Endurance 47 minutes after the battle ended. What they found was a ship that should not have existed. The hull was torn open in a dozen places. Entire sections had been vaporized. Fires still burned in compartments that had somehow retained atmosphere. The vessel looked less like a warship and more like a piece of wreckage that had forgotten to die. Rescue teams moved through the corridors in emergency suits, searching for survivors. They found bodies first. Crew members who had died at their posts. Engineers who had given their lives keeping critical systems running. Damage control teams who had sealed breaches with their own bodies when there was nothing else to use. They found survivors too. Wounded men and women, many of them barely clinging to life. They found crew members who had crawled through burning passageways to rescue their comrades. They found sailors who had refused evacuation because someone had to keep the ship moving. They found Admiral Miriam Okonkwo on the bridge, unconscious but alive. Her injuries were severe. Multiple broken ribs, internal bleeding, spinal damage. The medical team that reached her later said she should have been dead twice over. Humans, they were learning, did not die easily. Of the 8,000 crew members who had served in the 7th Expeditionary Group, 4,217 survived. The rest had given their lives in defense of people they had never met. Governor Chen declared a day of mourning for New Geneva. Every flag flew at half-staff. Every broadcast carried the names of the fallen. 2 million people who had been hours from slavery or death paused to honor the strangers who had saved them. And across the galaxy, the news spread. The battle had been broadcast in real time. Every species in the sector had watched. They had seen the Velthari resonance field fail. They had seen 12 ships stand against 300. They had seen an Archon die. For species who had lived under Velthari domination for millennia, it was a revelation. The untouchable could be touched. The invincible could be defeated. All it took was the will to fight. Subarchon Prismus withdrew the Velthari fleet from New Geneva space 36 hours after the battle. She did not demand surrender. She did not threaten retaliation. She simply ordered her ships to leave. The official reason was tactical. The fleet had taken unacceptable losses. Archon Crystallis was dead. There was no point in continuing a battle that had already cost so much. The real reason was simpler. Prismus had seen what humans could do. She had no desire to find out what they would do if pushed further. Admiral Okonkwo regained consciousness 3 days after the battle. She woke in a medical facility on New Geneva, surrounded by machines that were keeping her alive. Governor Chen was waiting by her bedside. "Admiral," he said softly, "how do you feel?" Okonkwo considered the question. "Like I fought 300 warships with 12 ships in one." Chen smiled. "You did. How many?" she asked. "How many of my people survived?" "Over 4,000. And because of them, 2 million colonists are alive. Your ships bought us enough time to evacuate over 1 million people before the Velthari stood down." Okonkwo closed her eyes. 4,000 survivors out of 8,000. Half her crew dead. 6 ships destroyed. The Endurance would never fly again. It was a terrible price. But 2 million people were alive. And the Velthari had learned that humans were not to be taken lightly. "It was worth it," she said quietly. "Every life, every sacrifice. It was worth it." Chen took her hand. "The galaxy agrees. We're receiving messages from dozens of species. They want to know about humanity, about how we fight, about why we fight." "What are you telling them?" "The truth. That humans don't abandon their own. That we fight for each other. That we never give up, even when the odds are impossible." Chen paused. "Admiral, you've changed everything. The Velthari have dominated this region for 12,000 years. In one day, you showed the galaxy that their reign can end." Okonkwo thought about that. She thought about the ships she had lost, the people who had died following her orders, the terrible cost of standing up to an empire, and she thought about what would come next. Other species would see what humans had done. They would begin to question their own submission. The Velthari would face challenges they had never faced before. The galaxy was about to change. "I need to speak to my surviving crew," she said. "They deserve to know what they accomplished." "They know," Chen replied. "The whole galaxy knows. You're heroes, Admiral. All of you." 3 weeks later, Admiral Okonkwo addressed the survivors of the 7th Expeditionary Group in a memorial ceremony on New Geneva. She stood on a stage before 4,000 men and women who had done the impossible. Behind her, a monument was being built. 6 pillars of stone, one for each ship destroyed. Around the pillars, 4,000 names would be carved. The names of those who did not survive. Okonkwo was still healing. She would need months of therapy before she could walk without assistance. The doctors said she might never fully recover. She stood anyway. "We came here to die," she said. "We knew that. Every one of us knew that when we jumped into this system. We came anyway because there were 2 million people who needed help and we were the only ones who could give it." She paused, looking out at the faces of her crew. "We lost half our people. We lost 6 ships. We lost friends and family and brothers and sisters in arms. That price was terrible. That price will never be forgotten." Her voice hardened. "But here is what we gained. 2 million colonists are alive today because of us. The Velthari Dominion learned that they are not untouchable, and every species in this galaxy learned that they do not have to be afraid." She raised her head. "For 12,000 years, the Velthari have ruled through fear. Today that fear is broken. Not because we won. We didn't win. We survived. But sometimes, surviving is enough. Sometimes, simply refusing to die sends a message that changes everything." She looked at the monument being built behind her. "Our dead did not die for nothing. They died for an idea. The idea that some things are worth fighting for even when you cannot win. The idea that courage matters. The idea that one person, one ship, one fleet standing up against tyranny can inspire others to do the same." She turned back to her crew. "We are the 7th Expeditionary Group. We are battered. We are broken. We are fewer than we were. But we are still here. And as long as we are here, we will remember what we did. We will remember what our friends gave. And we will make sure the galaxy never forgets." The ceremony ended with the reading of names. 4,073 names. Crew members from every ship, every rank, every background. It took 3 hours to read them all. No one left. Every survivor stayed until the last name was spoken. And when it was over, they did not weep. They raised their heads. They straightened their backs. They looked at each other with pride that no wound could diminish. They were heroes. 6 months after the Battle of New Geneva, the first formal alliance between humanity and another species was signed. The Kalari, a people who had been subjugated by the Velthari for 2,000 years, approached Earth with a proposal. They wanted to learn how to fight. They wanted to learn how to resist. Humanity agreed to teach them. Within a year, 3 more species had joined the alliance. Within 5 years, there were 12. Within a decade, the Velthari Dominion faced organized resistance across a third of their territory. The empire that had been untouchable for 12,000 years began to crumble. Admiral Miriam Okonkwo lived to see it happen. She never fully recovered from her wounds. She walked with a cane for the rest of her life. But she continued to serve, advising the alliance, training new officers, teaching the lessons she had learned at New Geneva. She died at the age of 92, surrounded by family and friends and former crew members. Her last words were a message for the galaxy that had changed because of what she had done. "Keep fighting," she said. "Never surrender. Never forget." She was buried on New Geneva, at the base of the monument to the 7th Expeditionary Group. 6 pillars of stone, 4,073 names, and now, one more. Admiral Miriam Okonkwo, the woman who taught the galaxy that even the untouchable could be touched. The Velthari eventually fell, not in a single dramatic battle, but in 1,000 small ones. Species that had been conquered for millennia rose up. Fleets that had never dared to resist suddenly found their courage. The resonance field that had made the Dominion invincible failed again and again against enemies who built ships the way humans did. Simple, redundant, ugly, human. In the end, the Velthari sued for peace. They gave up their conquered worlds. They retreated to their home systems. They became just another species in a galaxy that no longer feared them. And everywhere, in every system, on every world, the story was told. The story of 12 ships that stood against 300. The story of humans who refused to die. The story of an admiral who changed history with nothing but courage and stubborn determination. They thought they were untouchable, until one human fleet arrived, and the galaxy was never the same again.